The next two posters that we're presenting come from abstracts submitted that arose from one of the cases that we handled here in the office, a case involving Mr. Nelson. He had a very unusual kind of mesothelioma, one involving the pericardium, which is the membrane that surrounds the heart. When we got this case, we found that there was very little published literature on the subject. So with the assistance of our staff researcher, Faith Meltzer, we went through the world literature and found everything we could in English, and that amounted to not much more than 100 published cases. We looked at those cases and those case reports, analyzed them to determine just what they could tell us about a couple of important subjects. The first was, were these cases of this form of mesothelioma associated with asbestos exposure at work or in the neighborhood? And we found that a very significant number of them were associated. In essence, about 30% of the cases, in fact, reported asbestos exposure. Another 30% reported that after some inquiry, the doctors couldn't identify any exposure. And by the way, that doesn't mean there was none, it's just that they didn't find it. And in the other 40%, nobody even asked the question. So since mesothelioma is a very rare disease and only occurs in the United States in 1 per million in the population each year, the fact that 30% easily had identifiable asbestos exposure was enough for us to conclude, and for our experts to conclude, that there is indeed a causal connection between asbestos and this form of mesothelioma. The other issue we looked at was what happened to these patients. And in essence, the answer was that they did very poorly and didn't live very long. There were very few cases of people with this disease that lived more than a year or two from their first symptoms.